The winter wind howled through the concrete canyons of downtown Manhattan, carrying snowflakes that danced in the amber glow of streetlights. Ming Armstrong, CEO of Armstrong Real Estate Group, sat in his Tesla, waiting for the traffic light to turn green. His perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit and carefully styled hair reflected in the rearview mirror, yet his eyes carried a hint of emptiness. Another successful day at the office, another billion-dollar deal closed, but something felt missing. That's when he saw her, huddled against the wall of an old brick building. A young woman sat wrapped in a threadbare blanket. She wasn't begging or holding up a sign, just staring at the ground with vacant eyes, her dark hair falling over her face like a curtain. Ming found himself staring, unable to look away. She seemed different from others he'd seen on these streets. There was a quiet dignity about her, even in her current state. The light turned green, and horns blared behind him. Ming drove on, but the image of the young woman stayed with him. Back in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, he tried to focus on reviewing contracts. But his thoughts kept drifting back to those eyes. They seemed too young, too intelligent to belong to someone on the streets. "What's wrong with me?" he muttered, pushing away from his desk. He'd seen homeless people before. New York had thousands of them. Why was this one different? Sleep eluded him that night. The next morning, Ming found himself driving the same route to work. His heart jumped when he saw her still there, in the same spot. Without thinking, he pulled over and parked. The young woman tensed as he approached, her body language screaming caution. "Hi," Ming said softly, stopping a respectful distance away. "I noticed you yesterday. Are you hungry?" She looked up, and Ming was struck by the clarity in her eyes. No drugs, no alcohol, just wariness and something else. "Why do you care?" Her voice was surprisingly steady, with a hint of defiance. Ming found himself caught off guard by the question. I don't know," he answered honestly. "I just do." A ghost of a smile flickered across her face. "At least you're honest about it." Ming bought her a hot sandwich and coffee from the deli across the street. She accepted them with quiet thanks, introducing herself as Rain. That was the beginning. Every day, Ming found himself stopping by, bringing food, blankets, and eventually, conversation. Rain remained guarded, but gradually, the wall between them began to crack. He learned she was 25, had worked in marketing before everything fell apart. She never explained what everything meant, and Ming didn't push. His secretary thought he was crazy when he started rescheduling morning meetings. His driver raised eyebrows at the daily stops. But for the first time in years, Ming felt something genuine stirring in his heart. One cold morning, he arrived to find Rain shivering more than usual. "Let me help you," he said, not for the first time. "I have connections. I can find you a job, a place to stay." Rain looked at him, really looked at him, for a long moment. "Why are you doing this, Ming? What do you want from me?" The question hung in the frosty air between them. Ming thought about his empty penthouse, his superficial relationships, the hollow victory of each business deal. "Maybe," he said slowly, "I'm tired of living in a world where everything has a price tag." Rain's eyes softened slightly. "You're a strange one, Mr. CEO. Is that a compliment?" "I haven't decided yet." They shared a small laugh, and something shifted between them. The wall cracked a little more. As January turned to February, their morning meetings became the highlight of Ming's day. He discovered Rain was well-read, quick-witted, and had a dry sense of humor that matched his own. She never asked for anything beyond the food he brought, never tried to leverage his obvious wealth. Instead, she challenged his views, debated philosophy, and sometimes just sat in comfortable silence with him. The other executives at Armstrong Real Estate whispered. His mother left concerned voicemails about his strange behavior. Ming ignored them all. For the first time in his life, he was following his heart instead of his business instincts. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away. Not from those eyes that held both strength and vulnerability. Not from the mystery of her story. Not from the way his heart raced every morning as he approached her corner. Ming Armstrong, the man who could buy anything he wanted, was learning that the most valuable things in life couldn't be purchased. They had to be earned, one sandwich, one conversation, one moment of trust at a time. And somewhere between the winter wind and the morning coffee, between the business suits and the threadbare blanket, something beautiful was beginning to bloom. A story of two souls from different worlds, drawn together by forces neither of them fully understood. But understanding would come later. For now, they had their corner, their conversations, and the growing warmth of possibility in the cold New York winter. March brought unusually bitter winds to New York City. Ming noticed Rain looking paler than usual that morning. "You're shivering more than the stock market during a crash," he said, trying to make her smile. Rain attempted a laugh, but winced instead, clutching her stomach. "Just haven't eaten much lately," she mumbled. Ming frowned. "I brought you food yesterday." Couldn't keep it down. Before Ming could respond, Rain's eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward. "Rain!" Ming caught her before she hit the concrete. Without hesitation, he scooped her up, surprised at how light she felt. "Call my private doctor." He barked into his phone while carrying her to his car. His driver, James, didn't even blink at the sight of his boss carrying a homeless woman. "Mount Sinai or Presbyterian, sir?" "Neither. My penthouse. Dr. Chun is meeting us there." Rain stirred slightly in his arms. "No hospitals. Can't afford." "Shoo," Ming soothed. "Let me handle this." In his penthouse, Dr. Chen examined Rain while Ming paced the marble floors. "Mr. Armstrong," Dr. Chen called finally. "A word." Ming's stomach tightened at the doctor's expression. "She's pregnant. About 4 months along." The words hit Ming like a physical blow. "Pregnant," he whispered, "and severely malnourished. She needs immediate care, or both she and the baby are at risk." Ming ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up completely. "What do we do?" "First, she needs a proper place to stay, proper nutrition." "She has it." "She's staying here?" Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Armstrong, while your generosity is admirable, this isn't up for discussion." In the guest room, Rain was sitting up in bed, looking small against the expensive sheets. "I suppose you heard," she said when Ming entered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rain's laugh was bitter. "What was I supposed to say?" "Thanks for the sandwich. By the way, I'm carrying a baby." Ming sat on the edge of the bed. "Who's the father? Does it matter?" He disappeared the moment I told him. Something protective stirred in Ming's chest. "From now on, this is your home." Rain's eyes flashed. "I don't need your charity." "This isn't charity," Ming said firmly. "This is me caring about you and your baby." "Why?" "Because somehow, between all those morning conversations and cups of coffee, you became important to me." Rain stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. "You're crazy," she whispered. "Do you know what people will say?" Ming smiled. "They already think I'm crazy. Meeting a homeless woman every morning for 3 months? This is different. Taking me in, the baby. Let them talk." Rain's eyes filled with tears. "I can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what do you want?" Ming reached out, carefully taking her hand. "I want to be there. For both of you." Rain looked at their joined hands. "You're not joking, are you?" "I haven't told a joke since 2015. Bad for the CEO image." That earned him a real laugh, followed by more tears. "I'm scared, Ming." "Me too. But we'll figure it out." Dr. Chin returned with a treatment plan and a long list of instructions. Ming absorbed every detail while Rain dozed off, exhausted. Later that night, he sat in his home office making calls. His assistant nearly fainted when he cleared his schedule for the next month. His mother left 3 increasingly hysterical voicemails. The board members sent concerned emails. Ming ignored them all, focusing on what needed to be done. He ordered pregnancy books, hired a nutritionist, researched prenatal care. Around midnight, he checked on Rain. She was sleeping peacefully, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Ming felt something shift in his heart. This woman, this baby, they weren't just people he was helping anymore. They were becoming his family. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right, like all the success, all the wealth had been leading him to this moment, to this chance to make a real difference, to love without conditions or expectations. Rain stirred slightly in her sleep. "Rest," Ming whispered. "You're safe now, both of you." And in that quiet moment, as the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, Ming Armstrong made a silent promise. He would protect them, care for them, love them, no matter what anyone said, no matter what challenges lay ahead. This was his purpose now, and for the first time in his life, he felt completely, utterly sure of his path. Even if that path had started with a chance encounter on a cold winter morning, even if it led him places he never expected to go, he was ready for whatever came next. Because sometimes the best things in life arrive in the most unexpected packages. And sometimes love means choosing to be brave enough to change everything. The Armstrong estate boardroom buzzed with tension one Monday morning. Richard Thompson, the silver-haired VP of operations, stood at the head of the table. Our stock dropped 5 points since the tabloids got wind of Ming's situation. On the massive screen behind him, headlines flashed. Billionaire's homeless love affair. Armstrong, air gone mad. Pregnancy scandal rocks real estate empire. Ming sat calmly, absently straightening his tie. Are we done with the slideshow, Richard? Some of us have actual work to do. This is actual work, Ming. Richard slammed his hand on the table. You're destroying everything your father built by helping a pregnant woman? Ming's voice remained deadly calm. How terribly scandalous. Sandra Chun, head of PR, cleared her throat. Ming, we've prepared a statement. A simple misunderstanding. Charitable intentions taken out of context. No. But I said no. Ming stood, buttoning his jacket. I won't lie about Rain. Richard's face turned purple. Rain? You're on first-name basis with a street. Ming's eyes flashed. Choose your next words carefully, Richard. The boardroom fell silent. Meanwhile, at Ming's penthouse, Rain was dealing with her own storm. Young lady, do you have any idea what you're doing to my son? Mrs. Armstrong, elegant in Chanel, stood in the living room like an avenging angel. Rain set down her pregnancy book. Making him happy, I hope. Happy. Mrs. Armstrong laughed bitterly. He's throwing away his reputation for you. I never asked him to. Oh, how noble. Mrs. Armstrong's voice dripped sarcasm. The selfless street girl. Rain stood carefully, one hand on her growing belly. Mrs. Armstrong, I understand you're worried about Ming. Worried? I'm terrified. My son, who never acted irrationally in his life, suddenly brings home a pregnant homeless woman. Former marketing executive, actually. Rain smiled sweetly. Before life took an unexpected turn. Mrs. Armstrong blinked, thrown off script. Marketing? Northwestern University, class of 2019. Would you like to see my diploma? I keep it in my shopping cart. The sarcasm made Mrs. Armstrong flush. You think you're clever, don't you? No, I think I'm pregnant, tired, and really craving ice cream. But please, continue telling me how I'm ruining your son's life. The doorbell interrupted their standoff. James, Ming's driver, entered with grocery bags. Mrs. Armstrong, he nodded respectfully. Miss Rain, I got your mint chocolate chip. My hero. Rain's face lit up. Mrs. Armstrong watched, bewildered, as the usually stoic driver smiled warmly at Rain. The staff too, she muttered. Has everyone lost their minds? Back at the office, Ming's phone buzzed with messages. His mother. We need to talk about this girl. Richard. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Sandra. TMZ wants a statement. Ming ignored them all, opening his messages with Rain instead. Rain, your mother just left. I think she hates me less now. Ming. Progress. Did you show her your ice cream collection? Rain. No, but I did mention Northwestern. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Ming smiled, then noticed Richard hovering in his doorway. Something else, Richard? The board is considering a vote of no confidence. Ming leaned back. Interesting. And who's pushing for that? You. Richard shifted uncomfortably. It's not personal, Ming. It's business. No, Richard. This. Ming held up his phone, showing a picture of Rain. This is personal. And I choose her. You give up everything? For some. For the woman I love? Ming stood. Yes, I would. Now, get out of my office. That evening, Ming returned home to find Rain curled up on the couch, surrounded by pregnancy books. So, she said without looking up, I heard you're about to lose your company. Possibly. Ming loosened his tie. Does that scare you? Rain finally met his eyes. Does it scare you? Terrifyingly, he sat beside her, but not as much as the thought of losing you. Ming, Rain's voice cracked. I never meant for any of this. I know. He pulled her close. But I meant all of it. Rain buried her face in his chest. Your mother thinks I'm after your money. Are you? Yes, clearly. I orchestrated this whole pregnancy thing just to land a billionaire. Ming laughed. Your sarcasm is showing. It's the hormones. They sat in comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Ming, what if they're right? What if I'm not worth all this? Ming tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. Rain, before I met you, I had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. And now I have something worth fighting for. Rain's eyes filled with tears. These hormones are really annoying. Ming kissed her forehead. Blame it on the ice cream. Outside, reporters camped on the sidewalk, cameras ready. The board plotted in their offices. Society whispered and judged. But in that moment, holding each other on the couch, Ming and Rain were untouchable. The storm could rage all it wanted. They had found their shelter in each other. And sometimes, that's all that matters. The morning headlines hit like a tsunami. Armstrong Empire in crisis. Board votes today. Homeless romance costs billions. Dynasty's downfall. Love or lunacy? Rain stared at the papers spread across the kitchen counter. James, bringing in her daily smoothie, caught her expression. You know what they say about believing everything you read, Miss Rain. They're not exactly wrong, though, are they? Rain sighed. I'm literally watching his life fall apart. Funny, James set down the smoothie. I've been driving Mr. Armstrong for 10 years, and I've never seen his life more together. You're a terrible liar, James. Actually, I'm an excellent liar. Ask my wife about her cooking. That got a small laugh from Rain. Speaking of lying, James hesitated. Mr. Armstrong asked me to drive you to your doctor's appointment at 2. Rain's face fell. He's not coming? Emergency board meeting. Another one? That's the third this week. Apparently, they're voting on his removal. I know. Rain touched her growing belly, now visible under her sweater. James, can I ask you something crazy? Those are my favorite kinds of questions, Miss Rain. If I disappeared, would it save him? James's usually stoic face showed genuine alarm. Miss Rain, please don't. Just theoretically speaking. There's nothing theoretical about breaking his heart. Rain turned to the window, watching the city below. Meanwhile, Ming faced his own battlefield in the Armstrong Tower. The vote is scheduled for 3 p.m., Sandra informed him. Richard has the majority. Of course he does. Ming straightened his tie. Did you get what I asked for? Sandra handed him the folder. Everything on Richard's private dealings for the past 5 years. You're surprisingly good at corporate espionage. Please. I'm Asian. We're naturally sneaky. Ming laughed despite himself. That's wildly inappropriate. So is falling in love with a homeless woman. But here we are. Back at the penthouse, Rain packed a small bag with shaking hands. She wrote a letter, tears smudging the ink. Dear Ming, sometimes love means knowing when to walk away. You've given me everything, but I can't take your whole life. The baby and I will be fine. Please don't look for us. Just know that you showed me what real love is. Rain. She left her phone on the counter. Going somewhere? Rain spun around to find Mrs. Armstrong in the doorway. I thought you had a charity lunch. Clearly, charity begins at home today. Rain squared her shoulders. Come to gloat. Actually, Mrs. Armstrong moved closer. I came to apologize. I'm sorry, what? Don't make me say it twice. Mrs. Armstrong perched elegantly on a bar stool. I've been watching. Stalking, you mean? Semantics. The point is, I was wrong about you. Rain blinked rapidly. Are you feeling okay? Should I call someone? Oh, stop it. I'm trying to have a moment here. Mrs. Armstrong gestured to Rain's bag. You're leaving to save him, aren't you? How did you? Please. I'm his mother. I know what love looks like when it's real. Rain sank into a chair. Then you know why I have to go. Actually, I know why you have to stay. Before Rain could respond, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Armstrong board meeting erupts in chaos. At Armstrong Tower, Ming stood calmly as Richard ranted. You're choosing this situation over your father's legacy? No, Richard. I'm choosing integrity over your greed. Ming opened the folder. Should we discuss your offshore accounts? Richard's face went white. Or perhaps your creative accounting with our Chinese partners? The board members stirred uneasily. You're bluffing, Richard stammered. Ming smiled. Would you like to test that theory? I hear prison food is terrible. Back at the penthouse, Rain stared at Mrs. Armstrong. Why are you really here? Because my son loves you. And because Mrs. Armstrong touched Rain's belly gently. This is my grandchild. Rain's eyes filled with tears. I'm so scared, she whispered. Of course you are. Love is terrifying. Mrs. Armstrong smiled. But running away? That's just cowardice. Rain's phone buzzed again. Armstrong so retains control. Board member resigns in disgrace. Mrs. Armstrong smirked. It seems my son has been busy. What did he do? Knowing Ming? Something brilliantly ruthless. Rain laughed through her tears. He's kind of scary sometimes. Darling, he's an Armstrong. We're all scary. Even you. Especially me. Now unpack that bag before I show you just how scary. When Ming returned home that evening, he found Rain and his mother sharing ice cream on the couch. He loosened his tie, eyeing them suspiciously. Should I be worried? Your mother's teaching me the Armstrong family recipe for destroying enemies. Step 1, Mrs. Armstrong said primly, always have good ice cream. Ming noticed Rain's packed bag by the door. His heart stopped. Rain followed his gaze. I was going to leave, but your mother threatened me with bodily harm. Actually, Mrs. Armstrong stood gracefully. I simply reminded her that Armstrongs don't run. We fight. She kissed Ming's cheek, then Rain's. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a charity board to terrorize. After she left, Ming pulled Rain into his arms. You were really going to leave? I was trying to save you. Rain, Ming whispered against her hair. You already did. Spring bloomed in Central Park as Rain waddled. Yes, waddled, through her morning walk. I look like a penguin, she complained to James, her faithful walking companion. A very fashionable penguin, James corrected, holding her arm. Mrs. Armstrong's styling influence is showing. Oh, please, I'm wearing Ming's old Harvard sweatshirt. Precisely. Nothing says I've made it like wearing a billionaire's college merchandise. Rain laughed, then stopped abruptly. Oh no, what's wrong? Is it the baby? Worse, paparazzi at 3 o'clock. James squinted. I count 5 of them. Want me to do my scary driver face? You're what now? James immediately transformed his friendly expression into something that would frighten a Marine sergeant. The photographers actually took a step back. James, Rain giggled. Where did you learn that? Mrs. Armstrong's master class in intimidation. Tuesday nights. There's wine. Meanwhile, at Armstrong Tower, Ming was having a different kind of morning. Sir, his new assistant buzzed in. Ellen DeGeneres is on line 1. Ming looked up from his papers. I'm sorry, what? She wants you and Rain on the show. Something about America's favorite modern fairy tale. Absolutely not. That's what I told Oprah yesterday. Ming pinched the bridge of his nose. How is this my life now? His phone buzzed with a text from Rain. Your son is using my bladder as a trampoline. Also, James scared some paparazzi. Your mother would be proud. Ming smiled. First, how do you know it's a boy? Rain, mother's intuition. Also, he already acts like you. Stubborn and keeps me up all night. Ming, I do not keep you up all night. Rain, smirking face. A knock interrupted their banter. Sandra entered with a stack of magazines. The new headlines are in. Do I want to know? Actually, yes. She spread them out. Armstrong love story captures hearts. From streets to suite. NYC's real-life fairy tale. Power of love. How one CEO changed the game. Public opinion has shifted, Sandra announced proudly. My PR team barely had to do anything. Maybe because it's real, Ming suggested. Oh, honey, Sandra patted his cheek. Nothing in New York is real. Except maybe the rats. Back at the penthouse, Rain found Mrs. Armstrong redecorating the nursery. What happened to the previous design? Boring. My grandson needs something more magnificent. Still convinced it's a boy. Armstrong women are always right about these things. Rain surveyed the elegant chaos. The dragons are a bit much. Nonsense. Every prince needs dragons. What if it's a girl? Mrs. Armstrong waved dismissively. Then she'll be a dragon-riding princess. Even better. Rain sank into the luxurious nursing chair. Can I ask you something? If it's about the golden ceiling, it's staying. No, it's... When did you start liking me? Mrs. Armstrong paused her decorating rampage. Remember that day you were going to leave? Hard to forget. That's when. Because only someone who truly loved my son would give up everything to protect him. Rain blinked back tears. These hormones are really inconvenient. Darling, those aren't hormones. That's just feelings. That afternoon, Ming came home early to find his mother and Rain singing karaoke. Should I be concerned? He asked, loosening his tie. Your mother's teaching me ancestral Armstrong victory songs. We don't have those. We do now, Mrs. Armstrong declared. This baby needs traditions. Speaking of traditions, Rain added, your mother signed us up for a charity gala. Ming froze. She what? Time to show society how it's done, Mrs. Armstrong announced. Plus, I already bought Rain a Valentino gown. I don't need, Rain started. Yes, you do. Trust me, nothing silences critics like showing up looking fabulous. The night of the gala arrived, and Rain was terrified. I can't do this, she whispered, standing in her red Valentino creation. Ming, handsome in his tuxedo, took her hands. Yes, you can. They'll all be staring. Let them stare. You're beautiful. I'm enormous. You're carrying our child. What if I use the wrong fork? Then I'll use the wrong one too. Rain laughed despite her nerves. You're ridiculous. No, I'm in love. The gala was a blur of lights, music, and curious stares. But something magical happened. Rain, glowing in her gown, charmed everyone she met. Her quick wit and genuine warmth won over even the stuffiest socialites. Did you see? Mrs. Armstrong whispered to Ming. She just made the Vanderbilts laugh. The Vanderbilts never laugh. Exactly. Later, as they danced slowly, Rain looked up at Ming. Your world isn't so scary anymore. No, no. Although your mother's karaoke still terrifies me. Ming twirled her gently. Wait until you hear her baby lullabies. God help us. They laughed together, drawing smiles from the crowd. The former homeless woman and the billionaire CEO. The unlikeliest of pairs. Yet somehow, perfectly right. As the evening ended, Rain's feet were killing her. Next time, she told Mrs. Armstrong, maybe a less fabulous dress? Darling, Mrs. Armstrong replied, fabulousness is non-negotiable. But I'll consider lower heels. In the car home, Rain fell asleep on Ming's shoulder. James caught his boss's eye in the rearview mirror. Pretty good night, sir? Ming looked at Rain, peaceful and perfect. The best, James. The absolute best. I swear this baby is practicing kung fu. Rain groaned, sprawled on the penthouse couch. Actually, Mrs. Armstrong corrected, flipping through a baby name book. That would be Tai Chi were Chinese. The baby is only quarter Chinese, Mom, Ming called from the kitchen. Percentage is irrelevant when it comes to superior martial arts genes. James appeared with Rain's afternoon smoothie. Speaking of genes, the betting pool on boy versus girl has reached $5,000. Rain sat up with effort. You're betting on my baby? The entire Armstrong Tower is involved, James reported proudly. Even Security Bob put money down. Security Bob thinks it's twins, Ming added. Don't even joke about that, Rain warned, then suddenly clutched her stomach. Oh! 3 heads whipped around. Is it time? Ming rushed over. False alarm, Rain sighed. Your child is just rearranging my internal organs. Mrs. Armstrong clapped her hands. Perfect. We can finish discussing wedding plans. Mom, the baby comes first. Darling, I can plan both simultaneously. I'm Asian. We multitask. Just then, Rain's face changed. Speaking of timing, another false alarm? Ming asked hopefully. Unless false alarms come with broken water. The room erupted in chaos. Mrs. Armstrong barked orders in 3 languages. James grabbed the pre-packed hospital bag. Ming stood frozen until Rain threw a pillow at him. Earth to CEO. Your child is coming, right? Yes. Baby. Hospital. Complete sentences would be nice, Rain commented, remarkably calm. The drive to the hospital was an adventure in itself. James channeled his inner Formula One driver. Mrs. Armstrong called every doctor in her contact list. Ming held Rain's hand, looking more terrified than she did. Breathe, honey, Rain coached him. Shouldn't I be saying that to you? You look like you're about to faint. I've got this part covered. At a red light, James glanced back. Miss Rain, you're handling this very well. Thanks. Must be all those months of street survival training. Not funny, Ming muttered. A little funny, James countered. Mrs. Armstrong hung up her phone. The entire maternity ward is ready. Mom, I said no special treatment. Oh, please, like I'd let my grandchild be born without a proper welcoming committee. 18 hours later, it's a boy, the doctor announced triumphantly. Huh, Mrs. Armstrong pointed at Rain. Mother's intuition. Mom, Ming sighed. Maybe not now. Rain just laughed, exhausted but radiant. Let her have this one. The baby, wrapped in what appeared to be a custom-made cashmere blanket, courtesy of Grandma, blinked up at them. He has your eyes, Ming whispered. And your mother's attitude, Rain added as the baby gave a tiny but imperious yawn. Mrs. Armstrong beamed. Perfect. Now, about the wedding. Mom, what? The press is already calling. We need to strike while the iron is hot. 2 months later, Rain stood in front of a full-length mirror, wearing a custom Vera Wang dress. The press is calling it the wedding of the year, Sandra reported, adjusting Rain's veil. Just what every former homeless woman dreams of, Rain quipped. Former marketing executive, James corrected, entering with baby Oliver. How's my little CO in training? Rain cooed. Oliver, resplendent in a tiny tuxedo, responded with a dramatic yawn. Definitely your son, Rain told Ming when he sneaked in. You can't be here, Sandra protested. It's bad luck. Please, Mrs. Armstrong swept in. We're already doing everything backwards. Why start being traditional now? The ceremony was a blend of elegance and warmth. Ming's vows made everyone cry. From that cold corner to this moment, you've taught me that the richest things in life can't be bought. Rain's vows made everyone laugh. I promise to love you forever, or at least until your mother's karaoke sessions drive me insane. Oliver, not to be outdone, chose the perfect moment to demonstrate his vocal abilities. Definite Armstrong genes, James whispered to Sandra. At the reception, Rain danced with James while Ming twirled his mother. Did you ever think we'd end up here? Rain asked her faithful driver-turned-friend. Miss Rain, I knew from the moment you sassed Mrs. Armstrong about your Northwestern degree. Across the room, Ming watched his wife, laugh. She's perfect, his mother said softly. Even though she was homeless? No, because she made you whole. Later that night, in their penthouse suite. So, Rain kicked off her heels. Was it worth all the drama? Ming pulled her close. Every headline, every board meeting, every crazy moment. Even the part where your mother insisted on dragons in the nursery. Especially that part. Oliver cooed from his designer bassinet. Look at us. Rain marveled. The CEO, the former homeless woman, and our little prince. Don't forget the dragon-obsessed grandmother and our ninja driver. We're quite the fairy tale, aren't we? Ming kissed her softly. The best kind. Outside, New York City sparkled like a sea of stars. Inside, a family born of chance, choice, and love held each other close. Sometimes the best stories don't follow the expected path. Sometimes they start on a cold street corner. Sometimes they include dragons in the nursery. And sometimes, just sometimes, they end exactly as they should. Perfectly imperfect. Completely unexpected. And absolutely right. The end.